Hi guys, and welcome to the Is It Worth It for the T14, the Tier 5 American Premium Heavy Tank. This tank is available from the tech tree for 1500 gold or from the gift shop. And it's one of these nice tanks that appears on sale 50% off multiple times a year. And the question we're going to be asking today is the T14 worth it? So let's start with the history of the tank, and this is another one of these tanks that never actually went into mass production. Two prototypes were built. In 1941, the British and the Americans got together to design a tank as a joint operation. The Americans wanted a version of the M4 that was basically more heavily armoured, and the British wanted a tank that could outperform the Churchill 1, because as I covered in the Churchill 3 review, the early versions of the Churchills weren't performing very well. They were rushed into mass production due to the outbreak of the war, and they were underperforming. So the Americans wanted a heavily armoured tank, and the British wanted a tank that could outperform the Churchill 1. They got together, they designed the T14. It was designed in 1942, went into production in 1943. Two prototypes were built, but by the time they were finished and ready for testing, it was 1944. One tank was kept by the Americans for testing, one tank was shipped to Britain. And as I say, by the time it reached testing phase, the Americans had switched their research and development towards the Sherman Jumbo, which fulfilled what they wanted, a more heavily armoured M4, and they also switched their development towards the T20, whereas the British had switched their development to the Cromwell, and they also switched their development to later variants of the Churchill, and those tanks were outperforming the T14. So as a result, only two tanks were ever built, the project was scrapped, and one of the T14s still exists today. It's the British one that is currently in Bovington Tank Museum. Now, the major difference between the American version of the T14 and the British version of the T14 is its gun. The Americans fitted the tank with the same gun that came on the M3 Lee. It was a 75mm, whereas the British fitted their T14 with a 6-pounder gun, same gun that comes on the Churchill 3. I would love to play this tank with a 6-pounder, but unfortunately what we have in-game is the American version with the 75mm. But that's pretty much it for the history. As I say, the tank still exists today in Bovington Tank Museum. So let's compare the T14 against all its Tier 5 heavy premium rivals. That's the Excelsior for the British and the Churchill 3 and KV-220 for the Russians. And straight away you'll notice that the hit points are very, very good. 690 hit points on a Tier 5 heavy is very good. It's comparable to the KV-220, very, very similar to the Churchill 3, which only gets 10 hit points more, and it gets 20 hit points more than the Excelsior does, which again could save your life, but it basically means that the T14 is very, very competitive hit point wise. It's quite a heavy tank. It's the second heaviest of all the Tier 5 premium heavy tanks, and it comes in at about 48 tons. It's it's definitely heavier than the Excelsior and the Churchill, and only the KV-220 has it beaten when it comes to weight. However, even though it's a heavy tank, what the T14 does have on its side is a very, very good engine. It has a very, very powerful engine, easily the best engine of all of these tanks. It comes in at 720 horsepower, and it means that the T14 accelerates far, far better than you would expect it to. The top speed comes in at 34 kilometers an hour, which is roughly about the same top speed as the KV-220, faster than the Churchill 3 and not quite as fast as the Excelsior. But the difference is, because it has a good engine, it can accelerate up to 34 kilometers an hour very, very easily. The speed and acceleration of the T14 are one of the things that really, really surprised me when I first started playing the tank. However, it's not all good news. Unfortunately, the T14 has a very, very poor traverse speed. It comes in at hull traverse of 20 degrees per second, which is, worse than the Excelsior, but when put into context is the same as the Churchill and the KV-220. So even though it's fast in a straight line, when it comes to traversing, it does actually feel like a heavy tank. And the news only gets worse because it only has a turret traverse speed of 26 degrees per second. So poor hull traverse and poor turret traverse compared to the others. The Excelsior gets 36, the Churchill gets 34, and it matches the, or it's actually better than the KV-220s. I wasn't aware of that. But basically, yeah, the hull traverse, turret traverse are not great. It does mean, even though this tank is very, very fast in a straight line for a heavy tank, you can actually find yourself getting circled to death. Enemy tanks can get to your side and rear far more easily than they could maybe in a tank with a faster turret traverse speed. And continuing the bad news, we've got view range, which only comes in at 330 meters. Significantly worse than the Excelsior or the Churchill 3, and it only beats the KV-220, which is as blind as a bat at 310. So 330 meters view range is not fantastic, definitely not good on a T14. However, the signal range is very, very competitive. It comes in at 570 meters, which is the same as the Excelsior and the Churchill 3, only the KV-220 is worse. When it comes to armor, the T14 doesn't look fantastic. Yeah, on paper, it's only got 50 millimeters of frontal armor, 50 millimeters of side armor, and 50 millimeters of rear armor. That means it gets much, much worse frontal hull armor than the Excelsior, than the Churchill 3, and even the KV-220 has twice as much frontal hull armor. But that doesn't tell the whole story, and we're going to go into Tank Viewer in a moment to discuss the armor on the T14. But on paper, the armor does not look great, and that could be something that makes people not buy this tank. However, the turret armor is pretty good. It's got 101 millimeters of turret armor all round. That is only slightly worse than the front of the Excelsior, but it has its sides and rear beaten. It's much better than the turret on the Churchill 3, and again, much better than the turret on the KV-220. So this tank actually has very, very good turret armor on paper, and very, very poor hull armor on paper, especially compared to the other tanks. But as I say, that doesn't tell the whole story. You see, unlike the Churchill 3 claims to have 176 millimeters of armor, but that only refers to a small area of frontal armor around the machine gun port. The T14 claims to have 50 millimeters of armor, but that's not entirely true. First of all, let's hide the spaced armor here. We're using Tank Viewer, and you can see that we actually have 101.6 millimeters of armor on the lower glacis. Now, this is traditionally a weak spot on a lot of tanks, and you do find a lot of players who aren't used to maybe facing a T14 trying to shoot you in the lower glacis. That's actually the thickest armor on the front of the tank, and it's also rounded. So your lower glacis will actually cause a lot of tanks to have problems penning. It's got 101 millimeters of armor on the turret, and basically around the turret cheeks, and the roof of the turret, which is traditionally weak, is angled, and that is 101 millimeters. This thing actually goes hull down very, very well. You'll see that when we take a look at 76 millimeters of armor. The 76 millimeters of armor only refer to basically these very, very sloped turret cheeks and an area around the gun mantlet. Even the commander's hatch on the T14 is angled at 76.2. The turret armor is surprisingly good on this tank. 63.5 refers to basically the turret ring, also the machine gun port, which is an obvious weak spot on the front of the tank, and the upper glacis. So the lower glacis is very well armored, the upper glacis not quite so well armored at 63.5. But having said that, have you seen the sloping? It basically means that a lot of tanks shooting at 63.5 at this angle are going to have problems penning. The front of the T14 is very, very well angled. When we take a look at 50.8, again, the front of the tank, in fact the entire hull of the tank, is 51 millimeters thick. Again, doesn't seem like much, but look at the angle, look at the sloping. So the tank's armor is surprisingly good, even though on paper it's only 50 millimeters thick. There are lots and lots of areas that are thicker than 50 millimeters, and the 50 millimeters of thickness that on paper it reports is very, very well angled, so it is effectively much better than 50 millimeters. Now the tank does have other weak spots. Again, you see the machine gun port is a weak spot, but that's 63 millimeters thick. The area around the machine gun port, however, is only 38 millimeters thick. There's a strip of armor, but it's very, very well angled just where the viewports are that are considered weak spots. Those weak spots continue to the viewports themselves, which are only 25 millimeters thick. The roof of the turret is only 25 millimeters thick, but again, you need to be in a very tall tank to take advantage of that. So yeah, this strip here of 38 millimeters and 25 millimeters all across here, extremely well angled. It's going to be an auto bounce for a lot of lower tier tanks, but higher tier tanks should be able to overmatch this strip of armor here very easily. The tracks count as 20 millimeters of spaced armor, and you've got 19 millimeters on the engine deck and just around the turret. The armor is exceptionally good. I'm very, very surprised at how good the armor is on the T14, considering on paper it doesn't look great. Now the armor only gets better when we take a look at the amount of spaced armor on a T14. But just before I do that, I would like to point out this area here in the gun mantlet, which is 0 millimeters thick. Apparently the T14 does have a weak spot on its turret I wasn't even aware of till I sat down to do this review. And when I sat down to look at replays where I was being penned by enemy tanks, I suddenly realized, actually, I got penned quite a few times through this area here because it's got 0 millimeters of armor. Now, it may have spaced armor. The gun mantlet itself is 101 millimeters, like the turret. That is spaced armor, but you've got to remember it's covering 0 armor. So again, like the rest of the turret, it's only 101 millimeters thick, and there are areas just to the side of the gun mantlet that aren't covered by this space armor. Those areas are 50.8, so 51 millimeters. So you can see that that area of no armor is only covered by 50.8 millimeters of armor to the sides. So you can actually pen the gun mantlet on the T14 with quite a few lower tier guns. The spaced armor continues. It's got 38.1 millimeters of spaced armor around the viewports. It's got 25 millimeters of spaced armor, again, just around the edges of the gun mantlet. There's a lot of spaced armor to go through on this gun mantlet. So the side plating is 19 millimeters of spaced armor. So this thing can side scrape very, very well. It can angle very, very well. You can see that when you angle this tank, you're exposing your strongest armor. You're exposing an area of armor that is very well angled. A lot of tanks are going to bounce on, but you're also exposing spaced armor of 19 millimeters here. Your tracks count as 20 millimeters of spaced armor, and behind that you've got 50 millimeters of armor. So this thing absorbs a lot of shots through its tracks. Anything firing heat or HE at the side of your tank, really, it's surprising how many shots are absorbed. The armor is very, very good. The tank can side scrape, it can bounce shots, it can angle, and the fact that it's quite fast in a straight line means I enjoyed the T14 a lot more than I was expecting to. So it accelerates well, it's got a decent top speed, and the armor is very, very good. There have to be more negatives than just poor traverse speed or poor view range, and there are. So let's take a closer look at the gun. And as mentioned, this is a 75mm that comes on the M3 Lee medium tank, a tier lower, but it has a very, very good rate of fire of 15.75, and its alpha damage is 110. Basically unupgraded without any equipment and just a 100% crew, the DPM on this tank is about 1800. But things start to get crazy when you start putting equipment on this tank. If you fit it with vents and a gun rammer, if you had a crew in here, a very experienced crew with, for example, brothers in arms, The DPM on this tank can theoretically reach 2,300. So even without Brothers in Arms, currently, just because of the vents and the gun rammer on this tank, my DPM is around 2,100. So the DPM on this tank, if you've got equipment and a decent crew, is very, very good. Without equipment and without a decent crew, yeah, the results are going to differ. And as I say, you're going to be doing around 1,750, 1,800 DPM, which is still quite good. However, there are some negatives. And the first one is its penetration. It only has 92 millimeters of penetration, so you are going to be struggling to pen a lot of tanks. Now, this is a tank that gets special matchmaking. It won't see tier 7s, thank goodness, but it will see tier 5s, it will see tier 6s, and it will see a lot of heavily armored tier 5s and tier 6s. You're going to be seeing KV-1s, you're going to be seeing KV-2 T150s, you're going to be seeing AT-2s, you're going to be seeing Churchills. And 92 millimeters of penetration really does start to lack depending on the tanks on the enemy team. You do find yourself having to fire quite a bit of premium in the T14, depending on the matchmaker. As you can see, I carry almost a third of my ammo as premium ammo. So the penetration is not fantastic. And while you can argue that, well, 92 millimeters of penetration is okay if you know where to aim for weak spots, yeah, that's the other problem with the T14. Unfortunately, you've got very, very poor accuracy. You've only got 0.46. Now, that accuracy is going to get even worse in 9.6. The accuracy is not good enough to be able to aim for weak spots. The gun will troll you. Sometimes the shots go where you aim, and sometimes you can play a sequence of games where the shots basically reach the outside of the reticule every single time. The accuracy is not good. The aim time is not fantastic either. It's okay. In fact, I don't have that many issues with the aim time. I think that the rate of fire of 15.75 and an aim time of 2.1 is okay. However, the accuracy and the penetration is lacking. So you are going to find yourself firing a lot of premium shots, and you are going to find yourself getting frustrated with this gun now and again. There had to be a big downside to this tank because the armor is so good, and that big downside is its gun. So let's check out this gun, this engine, and this armor in action. We are here on Kamaran. It is a tier 6 game, so this is about as bad as it gets matchmaking wise for the T14. And I play my T14 quite aggressively, even when I get it into a tier 6 game. So I'm going to be going island. Unfortunately, not a lot of other heavies on our tank are going island, but I'm going island, where the view range doesn't matter so much, where the accuracy doesn't matter so much, and then a Chaffee appears, and you can see the accuracy there. Terrible, terrible shot on the move. This tank is not accurate, but we've just bounced our first shot from a Chaffee. So now I'm going to be working this corner. There's no arty in play, so that means I can be quite aggressive on this corner. And there we go. T150, I've got a green reticule, but shot went pretty off where I was aiming. No chance of penning this guy. You can see the orange reticule. And now there is a... somehow managed to pen the T150 and get 129 damage done. But I switched to premium ammo because now there's a KV-1 moving up. So you can see I'm aiming for his weak spots. Now you can argue maybe I didn't need premium ammo, but believe me, I have bounced on a KV-1's weak spots with my regular ammo at this angle so often. You see how quickly we're tearing him apart. We've already done 600 damage. He's just bounced. Go for an engine shot, miss him. Unfortunately, he's bounced again. Try to pen him through his tracks. This is premium ammo. There's a balance on his weak spots. And he's just penned me. So we did 640 damage to that KV-1 and tore him apart, but he penned me. And he penned me by shooting me through the gun mantlet. Now, as I pointed out when we were looking at this tank during the World of Tanks viewer, or tank viewer, the side of the gun mantlet, just to where he penned me, right here, is only 60 millimeters of spaced armor. And there is 0 armor behind. So while he was bouncing on my angled side here, he decides to put a shot right in here. It's about the only place he could have penned me easily. You can see he was trying to hit my machine gun port and missing, but there you go. That's that weak spot on the turret that I didn't actually realize existed till I sat down to do this review. So in the meantime, we're going to continue to be aggressive, we're going to continue to advance, and to be honest, the one tank that's worrying me is the T150, but there you go, there's that accuracy, that's that aim time, wasn't able, missed an easy kill shot in the Chaffee, and there we go. So, my spaced armor, again, spaced armor only counts for this area of the tank below this ridge. This is spaced armor, 19 millimeters of spaced armor with 20 millimeters of track behind it before you get it to the 50 millimeters of hull. This area here, this strip here, even though it's slightly angled, is only 50 millimeters thick. So again, I've been quite unlucky. The T150 hit me in the weakest side armor I have. If he'd hit me here, he would have got 101 millimeters of penetration. If he hit me here, he would have had to go through 2 layers of spaced armor before reaching my hull. So the 2 shots I've taken have both been through weak spots. And I've been ammo racked, so put my ammo rack back in. And now I'm on the front lines. My team are being aggressive on both flanks, and I'm just waiting for targets of opportunity. Now again, the T150, even though he's stock in front of me, he's bad news. But, however, this Leopard, you can see, aim fully. We've just bounced an archer who's sitting behind the Leopard. And when we let the gun aim in fully, and again I've got a good crew, good equipment, it can still let you down. But again, you can see how fast we're dealing out damage. Look at that, how low that shot went. So we finally take him out. So now that was an easy kill, but it was a demonstration of the DPM. We hit him 4 times, and we missed 2 shots. One went high, one went low. However, easy 8 over to my left. Side shot, easily taken out. So there's kill number 3. And as I say, the gun is not good, but it's not terrible if you've got equipment and a decent crew. So we'll go for a blind shot. So again, the one tank that's holding up my progression is the fact that there's this T150 sitting right in front of me. He's already penned me. He should have no problems penning me, depending on what gun he's using. And I'm pushing forward trying to spot him, and no sign. So I decide to go for a blind shot here, I believe. Yep, okay, so I shot him and it forced him to move. Now, I don't realize I had different graphics settings on, but I didn't realize I was shooting a rock here. Again, can't be one of my replays unless I fail a little bit. Don't realize why I'm not getting a reload. And oh, there we go. I've just wasted 3 shells shooting a rock. But it was a very, very dangerous rock, guys. That rock needed to be shot. So we move forward, and again, using bush cover and aiming at his weak spots, firing standard AP, orange reticule everywhere, and I switch to premium ammo. So he's turning to face me. And there you go. He's firing HE, and he's just killed my driver. So he's down to a 1-hit kill, and unfortunately not able to take him out. So HE will mess this tank up. While the armor is sloped, you've got to remember it's only 50 millimeters thick on front. Switch back to standard AP. Ooh, Archer. Just trying to blow away the Matilda Black Prince's cover. You can see we have the rate of fire to be able to do this. He keeps moving. Not gonna get a shot. Archer has come out. Okay, do have a shot in the Archer. Sneak one in. So, that wasn't an accurate shot, but the shot still sneaked in. So here's a Hellcat, 3rd person. Aiming fully. And we still have the accuracy to be able to take him out. Now, so the gun can perform. The gun is okay. But if there were a lot of heavy tanks on the enemy team, it would have been problems. So now we're in serious, serious trouble.
We're done for. Everyone get out.
There you go. No matter how good the armor is, it can't deal with the 180 millimeters of pen of a Matilda Black Prince. So even angled, even if I had tried to side scrape, those shots would have easily penetrated the front of my tank. So that was another ace tanker game. No other medals, but you could see I easily finished top on XP with 1235 because I was playing aggressively, I was on the front line, and even then my view range didn't matter so much. But you could see the DPM. I tore a KV-1 apart. 1482 damage, 5 kills. Unfortunately, I did die near the end. And the armor, even though it's fantastic, let me down in that particular game. Tanks firing HE, both did a lot of damage to me. Tanks firing APC or did a lot of damage to me, and I discovered a new weak spot on the tank that I didn't know existed before. So let's talk about crew. And the T14 has 5 crew members. You've got a commander, a gunner, a driver, a radio operator, and a loader. Now that looks very, very balanced, and usually when you've got a balanced crew, you'd say it would make quite a good crew trainer. But the T14 isn't a fantastic crew trainer. It's okay, but that's not the T14's fault. It's basically because the crew layouts on the American heavies are very, very varied. We've got the T14 here with its standard crew, which isn't too bad, but we take a look at the M6, and all of a sudden we need an extra gunner, and yeah, so not a great loadout. We've got to train up a gunner from somewhere else or find a gunner from somewhere. And things just get worse. We look at the T29, which is the same crew configuration as the T32. But again, you can see that most of the crew can be trained up in the T14, but the T29 needs an extra loader. Things get a little bit more complicated when we come to the M103. Again, because while we can train up the commander, the gunner, the driver, and a loader, we still need an extra loader, but we don't need a radio operator. So you're going to have to find a spare radio operator if you're using the T14 to train up an M103 crew. And again, yeah, the Americans don't make it easy. When we take a look at Tier 10, there are 2 Tier 10 American heavy tanks. We've got the T110E5, and that basically can be trained up in a T14, but again, we don't have a second loader, so we don't have to worry about that, but we do need to find a radio operator from somewhere. And the T57 Heavy has exactly the same issue, same crew configuration as the E5. You can train up Tier 10 Heavy crews, give them a double workout in the T14, or train up a new crew from scratch, but you're going to have to find a radio operator from somewhere. So there are going to be problems with radio operators, there are going to be problems with loaders as you advance up the American heavy lines. So it's not a fantastic crew trainer, but that again is not really a negative for the tank itself. You can train up most American crews, and you can train up Tier 10 American crews completely as long as you have an extra radio operator. So as far as crew training goes, it's actually okay. So let's talk about equipment, and there are quite a few viable equipment choices for a T14. I do have vents installed, mainly because vents help me in a lot of areas where the tank is weak. It helps my view range a little bit where the view range is weak. It helps my traverse speed, my turret traverse speed, which are weak. It also helps my aim time, which is not fantastic. So I like to use vents basically to just give me an overall boost to the tank, but there may be better pieces of equipment. It is up to you. And one of those pieces of equipment is a toolbox. Now, I do recommend a toolbox on a T14, especially if you don't have a very good crew. Basically, if you know what you're doing, you're going to be angling, you're going to be side scraping, and your tracks are going to be absorbing a lot of shots. Also, tanks trying to fire HE at you will try to penetrate your spaced armor on the sides. It may not do much damage to you, but it will knock out your tracks. So yeah, toolbox is definitely a viable option unless you've got a 100% repair crew, in which case you might choose to leave off the toolbox for some other piece of equipment. A heavy spolliner I think is a complete and utter waste of time on this tank. Basically, yeah, 690 hit points is nice, but you are going to be facing quite a few derp guns. There are a few tanks that are going to be firing HE. RT is going to completely mess you up by penetrating you from above, and yeah, while your armor is fantastic, really well armored, you've got to remember it's only 50 millimeters thick, so basically HE doesn't care about angling, and if someone wants to derp you with an HE straight through the front of the tank, yeah, they're probably going to penetrate, they're probably going to do damage. So yeah, Spall liner, to be honest, I don't think is worth it, but if you find yourself in a lot of games with a lot of people firing derp guns, maybe, if your crew members keep on getting knocked out, Spall liner might be viable. I don't think so. Enhanced gun laying drive is another viable option on the tank because the rate of fire is quite good and the aim time is simply just average. But I think there are better pieces of equipment. I prefer to use vents over the gun laying drive, but choice is up to you. Personally, I don't find too much trouble with the aim time. And again, I should mention that your experience in the T14 may differ wildly from mine, mainly down to crews. I've got a 100% crew in here. They don't have their first skill, they're not fantastic, but they're being trained up. If you're playing this thing with a 75% crew, believe me, the tank is a heck of a lot worse. Coated optics, I think, are a waste of time on this tank. Again, mainly down to the mechanics of the game. You see, coated optics give you 10% of view range, but if you've got a tank that has very poor view range in the first place, like the T14, which only has 330 meters of view range, that's only going to give you 33 extra meters of view range, so it's going to take you up to 363 meters. And there are a lot of tanks that come with 350 meters as standard. So basically, coated optics are much, much better on tanks that have good view range anyway. I think the T14 is a brawler. It needs to be up front, it needs to be personal, face-to-face with enemy tanks, where the view range doesn't matter as much. And while you will be on the move a lot in this tank, and coated optics might seem viable, I don't think it's worth spending 500,000 credits just to get 33 extra meters of view range that a lot of tanks at your own tier can have beaten without any equipment anyway. So I think coated optics are a waste of time. Binocs are something I do put on the tank occasionally. You'll see if I install Binocs, it takes my view range up to a reasonable 421, which is quite good. Binocs are viable because of that view range buff, but at the same time, this tank is not a sniper. We've talked about the gun. You've got poor penetration, you've got poor accuracy, and your aim time is not fantastic. Basically, this tank is not a sniper. So sitting back with Binocs and a camo net and a T14 is doing it wrong. You're just going to get frustrated and you're going to think it's a terrible tank. It needs to be a bully. When it's top tier, it can do this, and even when it's not top tier, it can do it. And then your view range doesn't matter so much. So sometimes I put a toolbox on, sometimes I put Binocs. It's completely up to you. To be honest, it's just whatever I happen to click on first. A medium caliber gun rammer is a very, very important piece of equipment on this tank, because your penetration is not fantastic, but you do have a nice rate of fire. Giving you plus 10% to your DPM is going to take you over 2,000 DPM. Now, if you're shooting tanks that you can pen without problems, you can tear them apart. But if you're shooting tanks that you're having problems penning, it's much, much better to have a faster rate of fire so you can get those shots out quicker. Yeah, I really, really do like high DPM on a T14, and I do really recommend a gun rammer. Enhanced springs, a complete waste of time on this tank. You don't need to improve the hit points of your suspension. Wet ammo rack, again, complete waste of time. This tank does get ammo racked occasionally, but not often enough for me to put a wet ammo rack on. Again, you've got quite a nice rate of fire, and I think other equipment choices are more important. And a camo net is a complete and utter waste of time on this tank. It's a heavy tank, it has very low camo rating anyway. Putting a camo net on it is a waste of time. However, if you are playing on a budget and you've got nothing other than a toolbox, camo net and Binocs to put on, they're free to mount and demount, then a camo net's not going to hurt the tank, but I think there are far, far better pieces of equipment. Okay folks, time for the overview game, a game where I show you as many strengths and weaknesses of whatever tank I'm reviewing in one replay, and we are here on Lakeville. This is a game I actually played and uploaded as a stream highlight a couple of months ago, so if you've seen this game before, I do apologize. But I really couldn't find another replay that showed all the strengths and weaknesses in one game, but you can see that our traverse speed is not good, but we're already doing our top speed. The tank accelerates reasonably quickly, we're doing 34 kilometers an hour, and this tank is surprisingly quick. So it's an encounter. We've got a lot of tanks sitting back on the 4 line, but I'm going into town. We've just got a couple of light tanks have gone into town. And I'm top tier. So in the first replay, I was a tier 5 in a tier 6 game, and this time I'm top tier. So we're capping, we've got 2 light tanks in the cap, and I'm just going to be working the 0 line. And yeah, there's a BDR platoon on the enemy team I'm a little bit worried about, because a BDR has absolutely no problems penning this tank. In fact, there are a lot of tanks on the enemy team that have no problems penning this tank, unless I can angle, unless I can side scrape. So there's a VK.
Penetration.
And we're going to work, and we've just bounced a heat shot. He's already firing heat.
Enemy armor is damaged.
You see we put 2 shots into him, and we finish him off. There's that DPM, there's that rate of fire. So first kill, 350 damage.
Enemy armor is hit.
DW2, bouncing, we're angled.
That one didn't go through. Penetration.
And you see a bounce on a DW2. Now, I do spend some time...
Enemy
Oop,
armor is hit.
sneaked a shot into the A20 as he drove past me. I do spend some time trying to sneak a shot. I can see his outline just about... It's not showing up in the replay, but I can actually see a small part of his outline here. I'm trying to sneak shots in. Oh, and he's still there.
Penetration.
So we're able to get another shot in. Now a Churchill 1 appears. And I'm not particularly well angled against the Churchill 1. Have to hold my shot, don't want to kill a hetzer. But you see, I've got a tiny bit of this guy. I just need 1 shot to go fast or through. But Churchill bounces, then he pens again. So I wasn't angled against the Churchill. He was able to put 2 shots in straight. He'd think he was going for my machine gun port. But yeah, no problems for the Churchill 1 penning me. I wasn't angled, but things are going to change because now I know there's a Churchill down there. So I back away. Get it back on fixed camera. So I've bounced 3 shots, been penned by 2. I still have 554 hit points left. As I say, never underestimate the 690 hit points this tank gets. So I'm going hunting for this Churchill, can't see him, decide to advance. Where is he? Oh, he's to my right, so... Oh, need to turn. He bounces on my spaced armor, so pens me, but now I turn, I'm angled, I'm on a downward slope, and he's bouncing.
Critical hit. We didn't
So,
penetrate their
this
armor.
gun, firing standard AP against an angled Churchill, very, very difficult for me to hurt him. I switched to premium ammo,
Enemy armor is
and
hit.
then we can pen him.
Penetration.
So all my regular AP bounced, my premium ammo started penning him, he bounces another couple of shots. But you can see when you angle and when you side scrape, this tank can be very, very good. When I wasn't angled, the Churchill had no problems penning me. Okay, so now the Churchill is focused on a tank that's coming up from behind me, and I decide, you know what? I'm not going to waste any more time there. This is what the T14 is surprisingly good at. It's surprisingly good at flanking. I want to kill this BDR. As you can see, don't have 6th sense. And unfortunately the BDR was waiting for me, but I'm on my premium ammo because I don't want to risk bouncing. And you can see that the rate of fire on the T14, he put a big shot into me, but I was able to get 2 shots into him. Never underestimate the rate of fire on a T14. So our RT kills the Churchill, this A20 is here. And it looks like the A20 is going to be running for it. So we've pretty much won town. We've also won the 1-2 lines. And I'm going back to try and save our RT. So there's a T82 that's flanked our RT. There's an A20 that's running. And yeah, there's that accuracy. The accuracy wasn't really an issue when I was shooting at tanks at about 50 meters away, but as soon as you start trying to snipe in this tank, that's when the accuracy and aim time can really, really let you down. So as I say, a lot of people probably give this tank a negative review because they try sniping in it, and it's not a sniper. It's a brawler. Get in close, get up close and personal, angle. and then shoot weak spots, or switch to premium if you can't. So I'm trying to hunt down this A20, I'm trying to hunt down this T82, and we've got a Churchill and a T50 who are currently capping. So I don't think I'm under any pressure here. It's still a 50-50 game. But then the VK, who was on the 2 line, has suddenly gone over to the city. He takes out the T50. Oh, here's the A20. So, shot on the move. Usually not accurate, but we're able to kill the A20, and now we're in trouble. Our Churchill 3 has died. RT and a VK spotted in the town. There was a T82 here somewhere. Oh, he's just been spotted, and I don't realize that he's already over the ridge. So I waste a couple of seconds there. And now I'm thinking maybe I've lost this game. There are 2 tanks capping. It's taking me forever to turn the tank. You can see that the traverse speed on this tank is really poor. But we can accelerate very quickly. We're already up to 32, 33 kilometers an hour. So again, the acceleration and the top speed are surprisingly good. Now, I switched to premium ammo because I want to shoot the VK. Now, unfortunately, while driving back towards Cap, I forget I'm still on premium ammo. So, this next little sequence here ends up costing me a lot of money. SU-5, premium shot. Forget I have premium in the gun, just want to decap. And this tank is absolutely horrible at shooting on the move. I may have killed the A20, but you can see how wide the shot goes there. See how high the shot goes there. This tank just does not shoot on the move. Thankfully, RT misses me, take out the SU, and I don't actually realize the VK is directly in front of me. For some reason, my brain registered him on the other side of the church. Now I've suddenly realized. So anyway, get under his gun, think I get under his gun depression, get 1 shot in, and our RT takes him out. So 5 kills and 17, almost 1800 damage. And that's the T14 as a top tier tank. Another ace tanker in the T14. This time we also picked up a steel wall and high caliber. And again, 1217 XP, 1771 damage, and this probably is about the average damage I tend to do in a T14. And again, 5 kills just like the earlier game. The tank is very good when it's top tier. It's very good, or it's not very good, but it's okay when it gets into a tier 6 game. It's not going to make you a lot of money. Even though I was spamming some premium shells in that game, I still ended up making 29,000 credits. It's not a fantastic money maker when you do have to fire a lot of premium, but overall I think the tank is better than a lot of people would have you believe. Okay folks, time to sum up. Is the T14 worth 1500 gold or 750 gold if you decide to pick it up in a half price special? A lot of YouTubers and a lot of Twitch streamers make fun of this tank. They call it one of the worst tanks in the game, one of the worst premium tanks in the game, and they make funny videos talking about how bad this tank is. And sometimes tanks suit you. They suit your game style, your play style, the way you play the game. It was one of the last premium tier 5 tanks I bought from the tech tree because I've been reading negative reviews about the tank and I really wasn't in a hurry to play it. And in my first game I picked up an ace tanker. And in a lot of games I've played in the T14 after that, I've picked up ace tankers. And it means that a lot of people are either playing this tank really badly, or a lot of people just aren't playing this tank because reviews are bad, so they tend to buy and play other tanks instead. I don't think the T14, I'm going to put my opinion in the ring, I'm going to say the T14 is not a terrible tank. It certainly doesn't deserve all the abuse it gets from other reviewers. I think the T14 has its strengths and I think it has its weaknesses. And this tank can be very good. It can also be very bad. It's not consistent. It's dependent on what tanks are on the enemy team. And I think that's one of the reasons people dislike it. And it's one of my major criticisms. It's not a consistent tank. In one matchup you can be godlike, and in the next matchup you can find yourself lacking, find yourself frustrated, and find yourself firing a lot of premium ammo because of the tanks that are on the enemy team. But there's a lot to like about the T14. It's got a decent amount of hit points, it's got a decent engine, it accelerates well, it's got a nice top speed for a tier 5 heavy. It's got its armor can be godlike. The armor can be absolutely fantastic. If you know what you're doing, if you angle and side scrape, the armor is very, very good. It can go hull down. It's got 101 millimeters of turret armor all round, and the turret is quite small on the tank, so you can actually use it to go hull down. You can also use it as a hill warrior. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression. I forgot to mention that before now. So the gun depression on the tank is very, very good, which means it's very, very versatile. And it carries a lot of ammunition, which is something else I forgot to mention when I was talking about the gun. It carries 90 rounds of ammunition, so you don't find yourself running out of ammunition like you do in some of the other tier 5 premium tanks. It's got a really, really nice rate of fire of almost 16 rounds a minute, and 110 alpha damage means the DPM at its most basic is about 1800, but you can get that up to well over 2100, 2200, even, as I say, theoretically up to 2300 if you're rolling high. The DPM on this machine is insane if you have a very good crew and if you have very good equipment choices. It also gets special matchmaking, so it will never see tier 7s, and with this gun you don't want to see tier 7s. But the gun does have some downsides. It may have amazing DPM, but let's talk about the negatives now. The penetration is lacking. Even the premium ammunition on this gun is not great. You've only got 127 millimeters of penetration with a premium ammo, and if you're coming up against heavily armored tier 6 tanks who are angled, then even your premium ammunition can cause or have problems. The accuracy is not very good on this tank, so it's not a sniper. If you try to use this thing passively, it's going to frustrate you. You don't have the penetration, you don't have the accuracy to snipe in a T14. You can't hit weak spots because of that accuracy. The gun can either be very, very good or it can be very, very bad, and it differs from match to match, and it differs depending on what team or what tanks are on the enemy team. The view range is not very good on the tank either. Only 330 meters of view range, which definitely in my opinion needs to be buffed, but again it depends on how you play the tank. And the traverse speed isn't very good. The hull traverse speed is not very good, and the turret traverse speed is not very good. But overall, I think the tank is very, very versatile. It can be used to hold a choke point. It can be used to go hull down. It can be used as a hill warrior. It can be used as a flanker. It's got that speed. You can get to the side and rear of enemy tanks. I think the tank is very, very versatile. It's an all-rounder, and if you can work around that terrible gun, I think the T14 is definitely not as bad as people say. The T14's biggest problem is it's a tier 5 premium heavy tank, and you might be asking, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because as a tier 5 premium heavy tank, it's up against tanks like the KV-220. And would I rather be driving a KV-220 over a T14? Yes. I think the armor is better, even though the armor on the T14 is surprisingly good. The gun is not fantastic on a 220, but I think the gun is a little bit better than it is on the T14. And then you come down to the big daddy, the Churchill 3. Would you rather be driving a T14 over a Churchill 3? And the answer is definitely not. I think the gun on the Churchill 3 is amazing, and even though the tank is not particularly fast, and it's not as well armored as the stats show it is, I think the Churchill 3 is a better tank. It's a better crew trainer, and it costs the same. So the T14 is not a Churchill 3, and I think that is its biggest problem. As a crew trainer, as I say, it's not bad, but there are a lot of other better tier 5 premium heavy tanks to play than the T14, and unless you are planning to train up American crews on the cheap for your heavy tanks, there's another option. You've got a T34, which is a much, much better crew trainer for American heavy crews than a T14 is. So yeah, I, to be honest, like this tank. Sometimes it's incredibly frustrating, but I don't think it's as bad as people say. And while I don't think it should be at the top of your shopping list, and I think that the tank is terrible with a 75% crew, If you've got decent American heavy crews and you are looking for another tank to maybe put them through ×3 or ×5 events, you could do worse than a T14. When it comes to the Tier 5 premium heavies, it's definitely towards the bottom of the list and shouldn't be your first purchase, but I don't think the tank is as bad as people say. Maybe it's not worth 1500 gold, but it is definitely worth 750 gold. As is, I think the tank is good, with a terrible gun, and it shouldn't be the first premium tank you buy, but if you want to train up American crews, you could do worse. It's not a bad tank. You're probably better off picking it up on a half price sale. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.